Welcome to Post Games, a podcast about how and why we love video games. I am your host, Chris Platt, and here is something about me that even my closest friends don't know. I really wanted to be a cartoonist when I grew up. Simpsons, Nickelodeon, it was the dream. Truth is, most people don't get their dream job. Instead, on the long road into and through adulthood, something takes folks in a different direction. Maybe health or financial hardship interfere. Maybe a cultural mix of sexism, racism, and economic disparity undermine them at every turn. Or maybe they overcame all of life's hurdles, but once they stood within arm's reach of their dream job, it suddenly didn't look so dreamy. Today's episode, however, is about what happens when one dream becomes a reality, but you can't stop dreaming. Mike Pettry is a musical composer and orchestrator who climbed the rungs of the theater world and now performs in the orchestras of hit Broadway musicals. His performances have accompanied artists like Platt and Idina Menzel. But as his Broadway career blossomed, he began to fantasize about something else entirely, something related to this podcast. Making a musical video game. A murder mystery musical video game, to be precise. Murders at the Birch Tree Theater is a detective game or a deduction game in the style of Return of the Obra Dinn or Case of the Golden Idol. It's set across many years of a small community theater, and it tells a thrilling story of intrigue, small-time fame, and as the title promises, a lot of musical murder. This week on Post Games, a Broadway musician's double life as a murder mystery maker. Act 1, a gamer in the Broadway pit. Act 2, fine-tuning a musical murder mystery game. A Patreon bonus, 3 original songs based on retro gaming classics created by Mike Pettry and his longtime collaborator, Eli Bolin. And Act 3, the news of the week. Very quick housekeeping up top. I want to remind folks that you can get full show notes at post.games. You can subscribe to the Patreon for all that bonus stuff and no ads at patreon.com/postgames. And now you can find Post Games on YouTube and on TikTok. So much stuff. Most of it free. But the paid stuff keeping me going. So I appreciate that too. Now, before we get started, if you are not a recovering theater kid, I just want to let you know, don't worry. This is still a video game podcast, so while you may hear the occasional unfamiliar term or title, all roads lead us back to our shared interest. Trust me, you'll want to stick around. And if you are a theater kid, today's show will begin in zip, zap, zup. It is a new year and you want to eat better, but you still have no time to work with. You have no energy. You have so much going on in your life. Oh, what do? You do Factor. 2 minutes, real food, and you are done. You're not failing at eating healthy. You're failing at having 3 extra hours in every night. You're failing at not being a chef and wanting to do cleanup. Factor takes care of that. It has delicious food that is good for you. You got lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole food ingredients, and none of the yucky stuff, no refined sugars, no artificial sweeteners. It will offer you whatever you need to match your lifestyle. For me, Mediterranean diet, it really works well. But maybe you need something else, like a high-protein diet or GLP-1 support or ready-to-eat salads. Whatever it is, Factor wants to meet you on your page. Always fresh, never frozen, and like I said, Ready in 2 minutes with no prep, no cleanup. Just chill. I use Factor. I think that you should too. Head to factormeals.com/postgames, 50 off, and use code postgames50 off to get 50% off your first Factor box, plus free breakfast for a year. Offer only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscriptions purchase. Make healthier eating easy with Factor. Act 1. A gamer in the Broadway pit. Today's guest is composer, musician, orchestrator, lyricist, and now game designer, Mike Pettry. For the past 5 years, he has been a piece of some of the most important award-winning Broadway musicals. He played in the orchestra for the Tony Award-winning A Strange Loop and the recent critically acclaimed staging of Parade. Occasionally, he stepped in to conduct. But Broadway, for all its glamour and artistic value, reaches a comparably small audience. You are more likely to know Mike's TV credits. With composer Eli Bolin, he helped orchestrate the hilarious songs for both John Mulaney's Sack Lunch Bunch and, debatably, the single best episode of cable television ever created, Documentary Now's Co-op, a loving parody of the D.A. Pennebaker documentary original cast album Company. Now that's a lot of theater stuff. What about the game side? Well, like so many people during the pandemic, Mike fell deep into his very first passion, video games. Not just playing them, he'd never really dropped that hobby, but making them. The music you are hearing right now is from his video game. In the first part of our extended conversation today, Mike gives us a behind-the-curtain look at life as a Broadway musician, how he fits gaming into his unusual schedule, and how gaming has, and hasn't, spread amongst his fellow musical performers. In the second half, we dig into his upcoming game, along with the real-life drama of community theater that inspired it. And we talk about how he juggles two creative lives at once. The lights are dimming, the curtain is rising. Let the show begin. In the professional musical theater world, do you come across many other people who play video games?
I used to not. I feel like more and more I am starting to find people, and I've tried to seek them out. And when I find someone who's a theater person who does play video games, I really try to latch on to them and make friends and keep that friendship and see what they're playing, tell them what I'm playing. I feel like I am starting to find those people and maintain those relationships for sure.
Do you think that they're uniquely skilled at keeping secrets? Because I think in junior high, if you said, what are two things that you don't need anybody to know about you? It would have been that I love video games and I love musical theater.
Well, that's really funny. I never really thought, but it is true that it's kind of like maybe it's my two favorite things, and it's probably the two most embarrassing things about me. You know what's funny? I do feel like in the past maybe 10 years, as video games became more popular of a medium, I started feeling more comfortable myself wearing that as a thing I loved. And I started noticing that in other people. And, when I'd get in pits and musicals, finding the person I could talk to about stuff like that. So, yeah, I think maybe more and more people who have been secretly playing video games kind of in the past decade have gotten the strength of their convictions to admit it.
When I tell people I'm a games journalist,
yeah,
they tend to imagine me playing video games all day. Maybe not the people who listen to this show, hopefully.
Oh, sure.
But basically every aunt and uncle I have.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine people are similarly confused when you tell them that you work on Broadway musicals.
Yeah.
What is your job actually like on a day-to-day and month-to-month basis?
Well, it kind of really depends what's going on in my life, whether I'm on a show full-time or if I'm just picking up work between. I find that when I've been working full-time on a Broadway show, when you're in rehearsals, it can be 60 hours a week of being just in the room working. In that way, it feels almost like a traditional job, except I go there and I play piano or play guitar. But once the show opens, it really just kind of feels like, oh, I have this night job and I can have a more open day and I can kind of work on my own creative projects, which has kind of always been the goal for me. But it's funny. I would say I don't listen to as much music in my like day-to-day life as people might assume, because it's like, okay, I'm going to be sitting there and playing music for 2.5 hours. I kind of want to maybe listen to podcasts instead.
Back to the musicals.
Yeah.
I said that junior high was the period where I would be most embarrassed to talk about both games and musicals. That was a different time. But the weird thing about theater for me is it changed kind of like with my life. So by high school, I'm doing theater because it is the one place where I feel like I'm surrounded by a bunch of other people who want to be really emotionally vulnerable.
Sure.
Like they are the emo kids. We were all listening to Saves the Day and the Get Up Kids. And then when I went to college, and I went to college in playwriting at first, it was like, oh, well, this is a community of people who want to hear my voice. Or they don't want to hear my voice. I want them to hear my voice. What is the thing that pulled you into this life? What gets you to pursue a life of being in musical theater?
Well, I will also be vulnerable in this moment and say when I was 10, I saw a touring company of Cats, and it just blew my freaking mind. And that's super embarrassing to admit now because I think what you want about Cats. But as a kid, I was like, I can't believe the Rum Tum Tugger is coming out and flirting with women in the front row. Like, I just didn't know you could do that. I think I got so excited by that. It made me want to, at a young age, learn how to write songs. So I was like, I want to take piano lessons. And my parents were just really supportive of, okay, we'll figure that out and get you piano lessons. And, you know, I also wanted to act when I was a kid, but I think I started moving further and further into like doing music. And so I stopped focusing on wanting to be on stage and wanting to like be in pits. And I found that was one of my favorite ways to perform, because I played in show choir in high school and I also played in a punk rock band. But it really was like, you know, I always liked being in a pit and supporting theater, if that makes sense.
I completely get it. And a weird thing about your profession is it is behind the curtain, right? It is just off stage. Not everyone will be familiar with even the major musicals that you've worked on.
Sure.
I would love that everybody listening to this was familiar with A Strange Labor Parade. These are like absolutely incredible, but that's just the world. But I think many listeners of this show will know your work from Documentary Now and John Mulaney and the Sack Lunch Bunch.
Right.
Can you tell folks a little bit about those two projects and how you came to be involved in them?
Yeah, so one of my regular collaborators I've known for a long time is this composer, lyricist named Eli Bolin, who's an incredibly talented guy. He's a songwriter, musical theater writer, and he's a founding member of this group called Story Pirates, which has like an overlap with comedy. And I think like Lauren Lapkus was in Story Pirates a long time ago. And Eli also went to Northwestern, so I think he like knew Billy Eichner in college.
The Chicago comedy scene.
Yeah, so he had kind of like a foot in there. And so he and I, maybe starting 10, 15 years ago, started writing together, writing musicals and writing songs. And when he would get like commissions to write things, he would pull me in to like co-write songs with them and help arrange them too. So I'm not sure exactly how he got connected to John Mulaney, but yeah, Eli got pulled in to do this Documentary Now episode, which is a spoof of this the Sondheim documentary about
D.A. Pennebaker's original company. Original
cast album company. Yeah. And so then Eli pulls me because I had orchestrated stuff for him. He said, "Are you available to work on this?" And I'm like, I remember he called me. I was like in an airport, like about to go off and do this gig with these two tap dancers in somewhere in the Midwest. And because I'm like, when you say John Mulaney, do you mean like that John Mulaney? And he's like, yeah. So I'm like, okay, great. I mean, I'd known company since I was 13, so it just felt like, oh, I've been training my whole life to do this. So basically, Eli is going to be writing songs with John Mulaney, and I think Seth Meyers also wrote one of the songs too. And they are, parody is a strong word, but kind of like loving homages to certain songs from company for this documentary, which is itself like loving homage of the company cast album documentary. And so I'm having to, like, in the same way, pay loving homage to the orchestrations to, like, take Eli's and John's songs and make them sound period appropriate, make them sound like they're kind of in the same world as the original cast recording of company.
And can you explain a little bit for people composing versus orchestration, what the difference of these things are and how they work?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, composing, it takes many different forms, I think, but a lot of times you'd say that writing a song is different than really putting it on paper for musicians. Eli, for example, like writes, at a keyboard or piano, but he also doesn't have a traditional musical training. Like he hasn't written for like a string section or like brass. So, and I have more of a traditional background in that kind of thing, like knowing how to write for those instruments. So an orchestrator will take something that was maybe written for, just piano and translate it to a larger ensemble.
People can watch videos of you composing and orchestrating, I guess, at the same time, the music for your game on YouTube.
Oh, that's true.
And there was a great segment where it's, I think, 4 chords. I'm not sure exactly. I'm not a music person. But you're just going up and down by like little degrees over and over. And you're like, this isn't right. This is right. And watching you piece together that exact spot, it seems like it's a mix of both gut and a tremendous amount of education and like understanding a musical theory at the same time.
Sure. Yeah, it's funny because I honestly don't think you need like a traditional background to be able to write music or to write good music. I just think it can make it faster if you just sort of know what the rules are. Because I feel like rules in music are meant to be broken, but I think it's helpful to know what the rules are so that you can't break them.
Video games and music, all consuming hobbies. How did you balance them as a kid?
Man, that's a good question. Honestly, I started piano a little late because I started taking lessons when I was like 10. And I think most people who I run into now who are also do what I do professionally started when they were like 4 or 5. So I had a couple years where I was just focused on video games as a hobby as a kid. When I really, went for music in high school and in college, gaming did take a backseat for a while until I got to grad school and was able to have a little more free time. And yeah, so and nowadays, I mean, because I do music professionally, that feels less and less like a hobby. So I'm like, okay, this is maybe when I'll get caught up on video games.
Will you find yourself quite literally playing games when you're in the pit? Like, are there moments of literal overlap, or do you try to keep these two lives discreet?
Well, it does depend on how much downtime there is, like, in a pit. Like, I've definitely done that. Like, at some point, I hate to admit this, but during Strange Loop, I did take my, like, Anbernic, like, emulator, and I was trying to play, like, I don't know, like Shadowgate or something on, like, during a book scene. And it felt like, and this is maybe a step too far. Maybe I'll just, like, stick to my phone. So these days, if I'm in a pit, that'll be devoted more to, like, the crossword than, like, a game. Although, during Parade, I was playing, oh gosh, I forgot the name of it. It's on my phone. Paranorma?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, so I did play Paranorma a bit during
Paranorma
Parade.
Site? Is that it?
Paranorma Site. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Is that kind of what everybody's doing in the pit? Not playing games.
Sure.
That would be incredible. But some people have a book. Some people have a newspaper. What do people do during that downtime?
Yeah, I think these days, most people will just do whatever on their phone, but that could be if they're just scrolling social media or you're reading on their Kindle. It also just depends what the vibe is, because sometimes I've been in pits, like I subbed on a show last year, and I was told by the guy I was subbing for, it was like, hey, the conductor doesn't like people to be on their phones during book scenes. So I was like, okay, I'll just sit and listen.
When you're in the thick of a run and you are 3 months into a show or whatever, what does the show become to you? And by that, I guess, to put that a different way and be a little clearer, the thing that I always wonder is, like, how does it not just become a job, or how does it not become rote? Or does it just become a job?
Yeah. I mean, I think in some ways there are emotional moments that will hit you early in the show that you kind of get used to, the more you do it. But, there's still moments that you will find yourself, like, kind of remembering what it's about. Similarly, I also did the show this past year called Redwood. The main character had an intense trauma had happened to her a year before. And so there's like a really heavy song towards the end where she sings about that. And whenever I like conducted the show, it was just piano solo with Idina Menzel singing this like heart-wrenching song. And so I feel like that never got rote, just because it felt like this is super heavy. And also there's sort of like a huge weight of like, I'm on my own on this one. I can't fuck this up.
Yeah, you don't want to disappoint Idina Menzel. That's just like
exactly
kind of a firm past rule in musical theater.
The first time I conducted the show, I remember the second day going back to conduct, and an hour and a half before the show, like a stage manager comes over and is like, hey, Idina wants to talk to you real quick. And I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? But then she was just like, hey, you played beautifully yesterday. Can you just start this one vamp like a little later, like Julie usually does? I was like, oh, okay, great. So like,
perfect.
It was one of those things where it feels terrifying, but it's, oh no, you're okay. You're okay.
I saw you playing Shadowgate, and I love that series.
Have you played Deja Vu?
Well, on that note, let's take a quick break. And then when we come back, we will talk about the other half of your life in video games and game development. We are back. Can you give us the elevator pitch for Murder at the Birch Tree?
Yes. Murder at the Birch Tree Theater is a point-and-click adventure in which you are solving a series of incidents, often murders, at a Midwest community theater. And it takes place over a couple of decades, and every level centers around a fictitious show. Or, again, going back to my skill set, a parody of a show. One level is sort of based on a Les Mis stand-in. One is based on a Little Shop of Horrors. One's sort of like a Hello Dolly thing.
There's a demo for people who are curious. You can play 2 of the levels right now on Steam.
Yes.
I would say the closest comparison for me is Curse of the Golden Idol and the kind of current crop of deduction games.
100%.
And I want to get into that a little bit more, but when did you imagine the concept for this game? How did it come to be?
During the pandemic, I had a lot of downtime like everybody. I'd written music for a handful of games before, but I'd always wanted to do some development, and I had like a little bit of coding in my background, so I kind of knew what tools I would need to do that. But yeah, during the pandemic, I started piecing together ideas, and I never really quite got there with what the thing was going to be. At first, I thought I was going to do maybe like a 2D Return of the Obra Dinn that took place during a production of Wuthering Heights, but I couldn't really like figure out how to make that unique or what the gameplay mechanic would be, because I knew I didn't really have the skill set to do like a 3D game, at least not by myself, and also didn't have the funds to like assemble a team to do it. But then a couple years later, Case of the Golden Idol came out, and I just fell in love with it. I just loved the mechanic. I loved the sense of discovery and having to use deduction. And I started to think, okay, this is a mechanic I can wrap my head around. And as you can tell, I'm not hiding the fact that the game is heavily inspired by that game. But I started to think, okay, doing a similar mechanic to this is something I feel like I could connect my skill set to. You know, I started to mine the previous idea of like the Wuthering Heights game. And I was like, oh, I can just sort of like use that as like pieces of that as like one level of this game.
Yeah. When I talk to developers about genre or borrowing structures, kind of skeletons from other games that they admire, a thing I often hear is that doing that frees you up to do blank. It frees you up to do whatever it was that made you want to make a game to begin with. So what was that thing that you just needed to make a video game versus making a musical?
In the 90s in high school, I loved point-and-click games like Day of the Tentacle and Myst. So I think there's something about a sense of discovery and a sense of like puzzle solving that couldn't be done in just like a traditional narrative structure. It's a thing that you can only really get from video games, or if you're solving mysteries in real life, but they're usually not that clean and satisfying. So,
yes.
Yeah.
What makes a community theater a perfect setting for murder mysteries?
Well, I think I did want to take a step back and not have it to be like on Broadway while I'm working on Broadway, because I didn't want to invite any comparisons to like people I know, because truly it's not really. There are a lot of characters that are based on aspects of people I might have come across with, but nobody's based on anyone, if that makes sense. But I really also have always loved this idea of like these smaller, crucibles, these smaller environments where people get very invested in it. I mean, I would say a huge inspiration is actually this American Life episode. I think it's called Petty Tyrant. It's about like a superintendent at a Long Island high school district who just becomes a monster. And that always fascinated me. And so there is part of it that's kind of based on this American Life episode.
In journalism, when I worked in really small personal outlets, those were some of the tensest places that I would be, because people really put their all into it.
Oh, sure.
And it is their alternative from everything else. Where when you're doing it as a job, there's so many other layers. One, you need to get your paycheck. Two, you are more cordial because of that. Like, there's all these different things about it. It's just different incentives. And I'm curious, is that something that you've seen over your lifetime of being in theater? You know, the politics of professional theater versus community theater.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but that's very true. I personally have experienced like less drama in my professional theater life, which is not to say that it doesn't happen. I think I've been lucky in that I've been in a lot of pits where everyone is pretty chill, and the music directors have been pretty chill. So there's not a lot of interpersonal drama. I know that can be very true of other departments, but I do think in general that everyone's gotten to that level because they wanted to be doing this professionally, and to some extent have had to act professionally. And also you're older than you were in college or high school, so you kind of know how to not needlessly create drama.
Can you give an example in the game of what this sort of like drama and petty rivalries are? Oh,
sure. I mean, the main character who you do meet in the demo, his name is Mason Wilder. And so you start to see in the second level, which is where the story really begins, that there is this vying to be on the board of directors of this community theater. And that only intensifies and becomes this drive for this character as the story progresses. You can see the lengths that he will go to try to get on the board, and then to become president of the board, that it just gets more fraught. And it's funny, I mean, this isn't really a spoiler, but as I'm now sort of in the stages of like designing the last level of the game, I remember just writing a line for somebody in a note that said, it's like, Jesus Christ, it's just musical theater. Was this all worth it? Or something like that. And it just kind of takes me back to a thing that I learned about 10 years ago. The music director I was working with said, there's no such thing as musical theater emergency. And I was like, you're right. I think at the end of the day, this should all be fun and chill if you're doing it right.
Those sound like true words, and I suppose they are 95% of the time. And then the other 5% of the time is Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. And somebody has fallen from a very high rafter.
Yeah, that's true.
But yes,
safety first.
Yes, overall right. I'm very sorry that we don't do videos, so they cannot see that you were literally taking a drink of water and did the closest I've ever seen to a Three Stooges fit take. It really made my day. Okay, so you have a career on Broadway, something many people will see as the ultimate goal.
Sure.
That's all they could possibly want. Why do you want to make games, either on top of it or on the side?
That's a good question. I always wanted to make games, like I remember being in third grade and drawing up ideas for what I called Zelda 3 at the time. Growing up, I kind of didn't think that making games was possible. I grew up at a time where it was like, it seemed like all video games come from Japan. So I didn't think it was even an option until I took like computer science classes in high school. I was like, this is doable in a way. But I didn't know that there were like American game developers or anything, or I might have chosen that path. But yeah, if I wasn't doing this, it'd be another creative venture. I like sort of having different paths and different experiments in my life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Okay, so before game development, you were finding other ways to merge musical theater and games together. Can you tell folks about Bit Parade?
Yeah. So Bit Parade is a project I started with my collaborator, Eli Bolin, who I mentioned earlier, who was the writer on Co-op, and John Mulaney and Sack Lunch Bunch. And yeah, I pitched that to him as, why don't we just do a podcast where we play an old video game and then we just kind of improvise a song on the spot about that game and just try to make it just silly as hell. Our first episode was Mario is Missing, so we both played that game and then would riff ideas together. And the podcast is us talking for a while, but then we like have just a jam session, spitting out dumb ideas. And then I guess what is the secret sauce of the podcast was we then produce the song. We like off air, because it's time consuming, just create a fully realized demo with drums and guitar and vocal arrangements and everything. And we've found that to be incredibly, we kind of painted ourselves in a corner in a way, because we started to find like, man, this takes a lot of time rather than just talking. So the podcast is technically still active. We have a Face Raiders episode recorded, Face Raiders being the sort of pack-in game for the 3DS. So, yeah, it's still technically active, but it just takes maybe a year to produce an episode nowadays.
So for Patreon subscribers, we're going to include some of these songs so you can hear these incredible songs. To kind of set them up, let's start with Metroid.
Yeah.
Can you tell people a little bit about how this song came together and maybe what it's riffing on in terms of musical theater?
Gosh, for Bit Parade, we don't always think of it as like musical theater so much. We'll go with pop styles, and that will often start to, just because we wrote it, start to feel like musical theater. But yeah, it's kind of soulful, it's kind of funky, but then there's sort of like, it goes into this kind of big like space opera at the end, which is something that Eli succeeds in writing. He's great at that. I would say that's mostly influenced by like, ELO and like 70s glam rock, which is a thing he is a scholar in.
Okay, you mentioned painting yourself into a corner and how much work goes into writing a song.
Yeah.
I have heard almost those exact same words, but replace song with making a video game.
Yeah.
At what point did you find yourself, I guess, painted into the corner of, oh, I'm making a full video game? And how has the project evolved since you made that leap?
It was around the time when I was in the middle of the run of Parade that I started thinking, like, when this closed, because it was a limited run, I knew that there was a certain end date, and I had saved some money from that in Strange Loop. And I was like, I think I do want to like just focus on putting this game idea together. So I started spending my like daytime when I'm not at the theater, starting to put together ideas. Once you like sort of have a folder, like a Google Doc folder, it starts to feel very real. And like you're actually plotting out all the ideas, which is kind of how I started. I really started from a narrative perspective of making an outline, like if I were writing a musical or something, to like really start to put the pieces together. But then like I also started watching tutorials and teaching myself a new programming language. And so, yeah, bit by bit, it really started to feel like, I guess I'm doing this.
The gaming inspirations, like I mentioned up top and we've kind of said throughout, for Birch Tree will be very familiar. Return of the Obra Dinn, Curse of the Golden Idol. It's both an old genre, point and click,
right,
in detective games, but also a relatively new genre in a way these types of deduction games work.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you find so appealing about the detective deduction game.
Well, I think what's so fun about those games is like their ability to make you feel smart and force you to have these revelations on your own time. They're memorable cutscenes from big AAA video games, but all the most magical moments from those two games in particular happened internally for me. When you can't progress until you figure out a very important detail that like blows a case wide open, it feels like, oh, now I get it. And even though that the developers have led you there, it feels like you're the only person that has ever been able to figure this out in the world. So I definitely wanted to like try and recapture that in my own way.
What unexpected challenges do you run into designing for that genre?
I did try and sculpt it all out in some ways before I started designing the first level, because I really wanted to make sure that like there was a progression. And so that's been a hard thing of, okay, how do I top this? How do I make level 7 a little more interesting than level 6? Introduce a new mechanic or have a different kind of revelation, not use the same tricks over and over again.
The musical theater inspirations might be a little bit less obvious for people who are listening to the show. I want to hear, what are some of the big name shows that inspired this? You mentioned Les Mis already, Hello Dolly. But also, what's a inspiration or two that are really there for you, or I guess are there for the musical theater heads, the sickos, the hardcore fans?
Well, it's funny. I feel like almost every part of the soundtrack, it just feels like a series of Easter eggs in a way. So each level centers around a production at the theater, which is like a parody musical. And so for the soundtrack, I really try to take maybe my favorite moments from that musical and say, okay, what can I do to sort of change this or like do a spin of it? So one of the last levels I worked on was it was kind of based on Little Shop of Horrors, and it's called Bakery of Terrors in my show. I think Little Shop of Horrors is maybe the best musical ever written. I think it's just like the book is perfect, and yeah, they knew what they were doing for sure. But my favorite moment of the cast album, and actually it sounds better in the movie soundtrack, is there's the bass line in the underscore of Supper Time with bum ba doo 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 bum ba doo doo doo, and I just love that. It's like such a vibe. So I really like tried to like capture that vibe in the soundtrack for this game, for that level of, okay, that's really what I'm going to hone in on, and this kind of funky groove. And so there's stuff like that. Like that's the one that's in there for me. I feel like if you listen to almost any track from this game's soundtrack, you'll be like, okay, this is like the Sweeney Todd level, and I'm hearing little quotes that are not the original melody, but clearly inspired by like this song and pieced together with that song.
Do you think people who play this game, they should come to it with a knowledge of musical theater or community theater or have taken theater class in high school, or do you feel like there's enough with the murder mystery that everybody's welcome?
Honestly, like the murder mystery is like the focus. The gameplay is a focus. So I really try to make it like not a prerequisite that you had to have a background in theater to enjoy this. But if you did have that background, it would feel like, oh, this was hyper made for me. Like, this is really just a series of like little Easter eggs that make you feel like, oh, this reminds me of what it's like to do this show, or referencing this in a way that makes me happy. But none of it is so intricate that you won't be able to appreciate the game if that's not your bag.
We've talked about the inspirations of the game and the musicals and the politics of the community theater. But even if you did any high school theater or any shows, I think there's a flavor to the drama in the details. Seeing the cast list, and then also who the stage managers are, who get which props, and the kind of separation of ranking and cheering the people in this theater production that you imagine will have an audience of maybe 30 or 40. That there might be more people making the show than attending the show, which is deeply relatable. But yes, that is to say, I think you're right in having played through the demo. There's plenty there if you are a deductive gaming nut. But yeah, for me, every little splash is just a bonus. And I think that there's so many people out there who are going to relate to it. A few things to wrap up. When you project 5 years into the future, how do you see yourself balancing theater in video games and game development?
It's a great question. Here's the thing. Like, I only got my first like full-time Broadway chair 3 years ago. And it was maybe the first time I felt like, oh my God, I have like a real job. So like, I would love to keep working like as a Broadway musician, like as long as I can, just because it's like very fulfilling to me. I love musical theater. Even if I ended up not like fully focusing on writing it, like still doing it is really fulfilling to me. You don't make a fortune doing it, but it does feel like this middle class lifestyle, which seemed out of reach for me, like for several years. So I'm like, okay, I actually like have like some room to breathe, and now have this like creative time, like during the day. So that's really the goal. So 15 years, who knows? But I feel like 5 years from now, I would like to like, I don't know, still be doing this in the same way.
To wrap,
yeah,
I want to throw to one of the songs from Murder at the Birch Tree. If you could set us up with what we're about to hear and kind of the story behind what's happening in the game and what you were thinking about when you were writing it.
Sure. I think what I'm going to choose is the music to a fictional musical called The Mad Cobbler of Toad Road, which is clearly based on probably my favorite musical, Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street. That's another show, like Company. I still am like a huge Sondheim fan, and this is my favorite show, so I know the score front to back. And so being able to sort of pay homage to it is like a real joy for me. So I got to, more so than other tracks in the game, I really got to maybe have it be more orchestral in flavor, kind of use more strings, have it be a little more like, not avant-garde, but kind of like gave me some permission to be a little more dissonant, a little more brooding in a way. And it sort of matches up narratively what's going on, because you do see the main character. I hope this isn't too much of a spoiler. I guess you can probably figure this out. But like the main character is sort of like he's in a leading role for the first time at the theater. And you'll find through clues that he is on his way to like becoming an integral member of the board of directors of the theater. So it seems everything is going right for him. It feels like more triumphant in a way for the sort of rise of a villain. And I feel like that's sort of what happens to Sweeney Todd, is this bedraggled person who's had terrible things happen to him and then becomes a villain in his own way. And so you get to see a similar arc to that.
Thank you so much for doing this show. Where can people find your work? When can people maybe expect to play more of this game?
You can play a demo of the game right now. If you just search Murder at the Birch Tree Theater on Steam, it'll come up. It is available for Mac and Windows. It's the first 2 full levels of the game. For more information, you can go to cruciblejuicegames.com, or you can also go to mikepetry.com for more information about me and my work. And be sure to wish list it on Steam, too.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris.
Over the past few years, Mike Pettry and Eli Bolin have written songs inspired by their favorite video games for their podcast, Bit Parade. For this episode, they have generously shared a trilogy of retro gaming-inspired classics. Patreon listeners, you get 3 brilliant songs inspired by Metroid, Pokemon, and my personal favorite game and song, Toe Jam and Earl. For patrons, I'll click play on the post-games boombox, and for everybody else, don't worry, we still have the news of the week. Act 3, the news of the week. What if one of the best games for the Sega Genesis didn't come out until now? That is the question on the lips of retro gaming fans following the release of Earthian, a brilliant side-scrolling shooter designed for 16-bit consoles. Currently, it's only available commercially on Steam, which, understandable, that is where the modern audience is. But, to be clear, this will run on a Sega Genesis. And I suspect, knowing how these things tend to go, if the game sells well, we will see a retro home console release in the not-so-distant future. But, really, it's a great game, and you should just play it on Steam. And if you don't play shmups, another reason to give it a try, it features compositions from Yuzo Koshiro, who previously scored the Streets of Rage series, and at 57 years old is, in my opinion, the most influential chiptune musician still producing music after all these years. It is a musical episode, so let me throw to the Earthian score for just a moment, and you can hear for yourself. Following up on the ongoing push by payment processors to deplatform not-safe-for-work games. It's not good news. Over the past month, some Steam users have noticed that PayPal is no longer a payment option on the platform. Rock Paper Shotgun reached out to Valve to get a quote, and it does seem to be of a piece with this larger issue. From Rock Paper Shotgun, Valve have confirmed to RPS that this withdrawal of support for Steam transactions by one of PayPal's acquiring banks, quote, is regarding content on Steam related to what we've previously commented on surrounding MasterCard. Continued quote, in this case, one of PayPal's acquiring banks decided to stop processing any Steam transactions, which cut off PayPal on Steam for a number of currencies, a Valve spokesperson added. Yuck, that sucks. I have a feeling this is not the end of this story, and I think I'll need to do a follow-up on not safe for work games much sooner than I had anticipated. Lastly, a little bit of behind the scenes to my process. I like to produce this podcast a quarter mile at a time. A new Fast and Furious game will release this October from arcade game maker Raw Thrills. Now, most folks, understandably, are rolling their eyes. Fast and Furious games suck. Who is Raw Thrills? Do arcades even exist? But friends, this is just an IP livery covering a new Cruisin' USA sequel. Raw Thrills produced the criminally underappreciated Cruisin' Blast, which, might I mention, looks gorgeous on the Nintendo Switch 2 screen, or the OLED, or any Switch. You should just play the game. Fast and Furious Arcade Edition looks like a sequel by another name. I'm always honest with you. I'm always real with you. I want you to have trust in me. So, I'll say it. These games look like farts, and they sound like butt rock. But they prioritize fun above all else, and that's not so different from the early Fast and Furious films. That's a match. And that is also all the news on my desk for this week. That is a wrap on Musical Theater Week at Post Games. next week. We're staying in entertainment media. Will video game adaptations replace comic book movies? The video game adaptation is the hottest pitch in Hollywood. And I know because I went to a Chipotle in LA last week, and I overheard some people talking about a Pac-Man reality show. Am I joking? No. So I have a question. How the hell did we go from the 1990s Mario movie that looked like Blade Runner having some really kinky sex with Jurassic Park to today when Chris Pratt can voice the Italian-American plumber in an anodyne billion-dollar blockbuster? My guest, filmmaker and video essayist Patrick H. Willems has the answer. On the off chance you are unfamiliar with Patrick's work, you can start watching his videos on YouTube and Nebula right now, and you might just be finished before next week. But for now, I begin my farewell. Reminder time. Post-Games supporters get the show and the newsletter early on Fridays at 5 p.m. Eastern. They get extra acts and bonus materials. This week, Patreon listeners got 3 songs based on beloved video games. And each month, subscribers get a video in my ongoing series, Video Game Journalism 101. There are 3 episodes now. You've got the basics, you've got ethics, you've got the weird story of preview culture. And there are no ads on anything. Subscribe to the Patreon at patreon.com/postgames. Subscribe to the newsletter for free at post.games. Find Post Games on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram. Post Games logo by James Barham, theme by Mark Sparling, and a special thank you to this week's guest, Mike Pettry. And as always, feel free to leave a review or share the show with a friend. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next week.